Hi guys, I'm going to be talking about reflexes and how they're created. It's a really big misunderstood area of movement in the body. Most people think that reflexes as a patterning come from the lizard area of our brain. I'm going to disagree with that quite a bit. What reflexes really are is the body's ability to start collecting oxygen at a cellular level. And these specific moments of cellular level oxygen creation, now this is a Nobel Prize won in 2019, where cells can sense oxygen. See, this doesn't happen in the womb, right? Our cells are meant to float and be in a frictionless environment in the womb. Well, when they come out of the womb, right, we're exposed to oxygen, but we're also exposed to gravity. And so there's a combination of these two create the ability for buoyancy, right? And that's how one of the ways our bodies regulate gravity. It's one of the reasons we don't, in a sense, fall down. We're capable of falling down, but we don't fall down. So as our bones, our skeletal systems are meant to have key areas of rotational midline crossings, right? AT and R being a very famous, the fencer pose. So when that happens, right, people think that it's the pose. It's not. What it is that my elbow, in a sense, it's sort of like I'm in a giant latex ball, right? And I move around. And this articulates the scapulas, moves them out, but it's the first time because of the scapulas articulating, right, that our upper thorax can cross midline, right? And so when our bones cross that midline, that rotational midline, right, that fencer pose will actually go into a crawl, right, eventually, right? But our bones are meant to learn, and cells, how to collect oxygen. It's one of the first things that we need to do as infants in the neonatal period. Now, reflexes will come in and play. So really, when you're talking about plantar and palmar, again, right, the hand should look more like seaweed. And so going against gravity and having that buoyancy, all different directions, right? That's what's meant to happen. It's not a open and close, open and close. That's a song that comes a little bit later around, when they're little 1-year-old, right? So that's how reflexes are meant to come into play. Why? Did you know that astronauts can't create reflexes, right? If you bang on their knees and so forth. This is one of the perplexities. Well, because without the gravity, the buoyancy there within the cellular collection of the oxygen, it really gets thrown off, and our bodies can't respond that way. So what you're meant to do in articulation for movement, for developmental movement patterns, and how a baby's meant to develop is to get in there. Now, premature babies, right, they're still premature. They're premature in the skeletal development. They're premature in lots of different ways. Also, it could be for the oxygen intake, for their lungs, didn't get a full breath. Another reasons why it also happens is there's too much skin. The skin starts to grow and is almost fully complete by 30 weeks in the womb, and then the body starts to grow into the skin. So one of the calculations that I'm looking to come up with is almost like a BMI, body mass index, but more of a skin ratio. So you can actually tell by a premature newborn with the amount of skin ratios of where they need to do and learn specific developmental movements, even tummy time, that weight transfer, all those things that I teach you guys about. And that's meant to happen in later. That's why they're not meant to be premature. So actually teaching those movements, those gentle rotational movements, is what's needed to stimulate more so not only that weight transfer, but the way that the body uses buoyancy, rotational movements, and gravity. So when you look at it that way, so when someone says that someone suddenly has and they see them startle, they have an overactive Moro. No. Moro is a specific sequence that goes through the body, not only for this oxygen collection, but for all appendages to go against or within opposing points, counter opposing points within the pelvis, right? That's what Moro is there for. I can show you lots of occasions where I'm working on a child, they just Moro out, and that's what they're doing. They're starting to generate that momentum forces, and that's what opens up the pelvis to movement within two directions. And so when that movement doesn't occur, right, this is again where it needs to be identified why it didn't occur and then to stimulate that. It's really the oxygen collection within the cells and the way the body articulates buoyancy, right? That needs to be done first. To just sit there and work on what's considered reflex integration, a lot of people misidentify, again, where it actually is a startle. If I'm going to fall down, I'm going to startle. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have necessarily an overactive moral response. What my body is doing is actually quite intelligent. So when a child is going into that phase of developing dystonia, right, this is an active conversation that you want to have within that to deter that. We need better weight transfer and balance at a cellular level. And so you really don't want to go into force-based balance, because at force-based balance, what it'll do, it's almost like dunking, the difference between dunking a ping pong ball and a basketball in the water, right? You dunk that basketball in the water, the momentum it's going to have is huge. We don't want that. And that's where most people misidentify an overactive reflex. Reflexes are really there as a movement that's needed by the skeletal system to start going into developmental movement pattern, something they cannot do in the womb, right? And this is where the big jump comes. So understanding, again, where your child's at within this process of movement and movement momentum is much more significant to your child than to sit there and just, oh, yes, they're doing it, or A, they shouldn't be doing it, and deciding from there. So deciding that it's an overactive response to a reflex, again, can really be a disservice, especially if your child now is visually impaired or has other complications going on that will affect their ability to organize movement. This is the key. When you're working with your child, you really have to figure out how they process all that and organize movement, right? You cannot look at your child, like Louisa here, and she's been here, to say that it's a CP thing, it's a dystonic thing. We really, the diagnosis is there very importantly for medical conversations to be had. But when someone's actually looking to organize movement, that's a different conversation. And so understanding where your child is within this reflex integration or responses to reflex is really to understand, again, how they're organizing movement. One of the first things that a child or baby learns to organize movement-wise is oxygen at a cellular level. And so that's where you really need to look at how is their life functions going on. It's not just breathing, right? Oxygen now affects the body throughout, right? That should be your big aha. There's no oxygen intake in the womb at that level, especially with buoyancy, because now you have amniotic fluid, but also the body's not expanding in all directions because there's no expansion in the womb. We're not eating, we're not breathing, we're not eliminating. If we are, it is deadly to the fetus. Right? So that's what you need to take into consideration learning about reflexes.